All right, it looks like we are live. I'm just going to take a few seconds to verify that on our YouTube channel. If you want to watch it on YouTube, you can go to youtube.com/UA Museums. And we are also live today from the Gorgas House Museum's Facebook page and also the Mildred Westervelt Warner Transportation Museum's Facebook page. So we'll just take a few seconds here to verify and make sure that we are live as we should be. Not that it's failed me yet, but I like to make sure, just in case something happens. I don't want us to get in here and talking and then realize we aren't live. So we'll just take a few seconds to go over that and verify that we're live. And just remember, you can leave a comment or any questions that you might have in our comment section for our guests today. And we're going to be talking about the Tuscaloosa area virtual museum. So if you have any questions about that, feel free to drop them in the comment section. All right, well, it looks like we're live, so I will get us started. Welcome to today's Museums from Your Home live stream presented by the University of Alabama Museums. My name is Rebecca Johnson, and I am the Communication Specialist for UA Museums. And joining me today are Catherine Edge, Director of the Mildred Westervelt Warner Transportation Museum, and Brandon Thompson, the Director of the Gorgas House Museum. And I see we have some guests today. So, Catherine, would you like to introduce them?
Yes, it's always a pleasure to be on Museums from Your Home. As today we are so fortunate to have with us, we have Elizabeth Bradt. She is a founding member of the Tuscaloosa Area Virtual Museum, and Elizabeth and I have actually worked on this project practically since its inception. So I'm so thrilled that she could be with us today. And we also have Ron Harris. Ron is the Adult Services Manager at the Tuscaloosa Public Library, and the library is also very closely related to the Tuscaloosa Area Virtual Museum, or TAVM, as we shorthand called it. So thank you both so much for being here today, and I so appreciate it.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
All right. Well, before we get started talking about all of that, I just want to remind everybody that while we are broadcasting here on Facebook and the UA Museum's YouTube channel, you can ask our panelists any questions that you might have or leave any comments in the comment section. And remember, this is live, so anything can happen. So just hang in there with us in case we have any issues. And now that we've gotten all that kind of business out of the way, how should we get started in today's discussion?
Well, we have some. I'm really excited to be able to share the Tuscaloosa Area Virtual Museum on the Museums from Your Home live stream, because it really was the first museum from your home. The entire concept of TAVM has always been digital, and it's a digital collection that focuses on the historic photographs and documents of the Tuscaloosa area, which includes the city of Tuscaloosa and Northport and immediately surrounding counties. And it was a fantastic idea, and Elizabeth and Betty Slow of the Tuscaloosa News were the spearheads of this, and it's just a fantastic resource that is, especially today with everybody being stuck at home, is probably even more relevant than it has been. But Elizabeth, I just want to just kind of hear from you. So what is your background, and how exactly did you come up with the idea for TAVM?
Well, it wasn't really my idea. It was Betty Slow's idea, because she was the librarian at the Tuscaloosa News at the time, and she was aware of the many photographs that they had in their collection that were not available to people to see at all. I met her because I am also a librarian, now retired for some time, and I met her first at Shelton State. And then we worked together there. And then I was at the Tuscaloosa Public Library. So we got together and decided that we would try to bring these materials to the public and make them available for people. And the Tuscaloosa News was supportive of that effort. So that's how it began.
And Ron, what's your background? And I mean, obviously, as an employee of the Tuscaloosa Public Library, became involved. But what's your background, and kind of your perception of TAVM?
Well, I feel like I've sort of been interested in libraries all my life without ever realizing it. I volunteered at the library in my hometown when I was in high school. I worked at the library at my school when I was in high school. Once I came to UA, my first student job was to work in the library. But I came to UA to study computer science of all things. But fortunately, I get to use what I learned there on the back end of TAVM. So that's kind of what I do. I joined TAVM in the capacity to just do back end site maintenance, and also I and John Gately, a circulation librarian at TPL, we basically help out with outreach as well. So yeah, that's what we're doing with TAVM, and I think it's a great idea, and I just want to help TAVM grow beyond the borders of the Tuscaloosa area. So that's why I stepped on with this project.
Well, we're so glad you did. Elizabeth, how long has the site been active? It's been active longer than I think most people realize, but how long has it been an available resource?
I think that we went live in 2010. We may have started shortly before then, but that was approximately when we got started. The first thing we had to actually do was to have someone who would be willing to host it. And we met with the Mayor Maddox, and he was quite interested in what we were doing. He even came up with the name of calling it a virtual museum and provided support so that we could have funding in order to host the collection. The other person who was very instrumental in helping us get started was a professor at the School of Library and Information Studies, Stephen McCall, because he and his class looked for the kind of software. And once again, one of the criteria was it had to be free, because we didn't actually have any money. So that was good. And we, through their efforts, we selected Omeka, which was done by the George Mason University. And it was designed for the similar projects that we had in mind. So we've been going along ever since.
Yes. So so I guess I don't remember exactly what month it went live, but we the site's already at a 10-year anniversary, which is crazy.
I surprised me too.
So exactly, do you know how many photos and documents are available to view? Because with it being a virtual museum, the whole point is that everything is virtual. So that makes all of the material is the idea is that everything is flat, that can be scanned and then reviewed. So the point of the resource is to showcase these photographs and documents, so like newspapers and journals and things like that. But do you happen to know how many items are available on the virtual museum?
It's approximately 2,500. Okay, and we have also branched out slightly, but not very much, but we'd like to do more and having actually interviews so that we have recordings of people. So that's an area in which we hope to be able to do more work than we have in the past.
And
one of
the key individuals is former Mayor Al DuPont. There are a couple of interviews with him on the site, which is now very very special and very important, since he is no longer with us. So what other than if what I'm sorry, hold on just a moment.
Catherine's being a mom real quick, so I understand that. So Elizabeth, when you're talking about interviews, are you talking about interviews towards the idea of oral history from prominent figures around the area? Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Yes, although they don't have to be prominent necessarily, just sort of willing to talk. We did do one interview with a woman who father was working at the university in help to construct any chimes, and
Oh, wow. Okay.
who was living actually in the on the edge of the university down towards the river. So that was kind of interesting.
That is pretty neat. Do you have anyone else in mind that you'd like to interview?
Well, we're open to suggestions. We'll put it that way. So we don't have any definite plans at the moment.
Okay. Well, that's fun. Yeah, I'd be curious to see if we could help, make connections and help you all out with that, trying to draw people in for different interviews and see what we can do.
We would enjoy that very much.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ron, you talked about expanding the reach and kind of growing the project. Who or where do you have in mind in terms of expanding like the geographic reach of the project?
Well, John Gately, the librarian I previously spoke of, he's working towards having TAVM on Alabama Virtual Library. So that just expands the scholarship right there. So anytime anyone wants to find out anything about Tuscaloosa Area Virtual Museum or Tuscaloosa area, they could come to the site, and then that just spreads the reach. So what we're doing with that is working towards building unique collections. Before we closed, I actually was working on a program to collect oral interviews and basically call for unique documents and also photos relevant to the area. And that just makes TAVM basically the people's virtual museum. They feel like they now have a part in it, and they'll say to friends like, hey, look at what I posted to this site, and that spreads the reach by word of mouth. And also with the AVL, it just spreads the scholarship of it all.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. I think it provides a resource that is accessible to the public. And I think a criticism that we get in academia a whole lot is that the research that we do or the research that we participate in isn't always that accessible to the public. And if it is, it's pretty difficult to get to. So one thing I think is so important and critical about the TAVM is how it is accessible to the public. Anybody can access this. And James Scott, just asked some questions, so I'll kind of reference that. Thank you, James. Can anyone donate old photos to the virtual museum? Are there any parameters? What exactly can people submit to the website? And what does that process look like?
What we're interested in are photographs that are documents that are relevant to the history of the area. And we are quite open to evaluating and making sure that that is what is involved. And you can donate things by contacting the library. You could call them, although I don't know exactly what they're doing with their telephone service these days, or you can do it through a email that you can send to TAVM. And on the website itself, there is a link that shows you the email address that you can contact. But we are always glad to see them. One thing I will say is we don't really want you to donate the photos. What we would like to do is to have a digital copy, but we don't actually exist in the real world, shall we say? So that we don't have a collection that you can put your hands on. We have a collection you can view.
Okay, so are there any restrictions? What kind of I guess if somebody scanned an old image they have from the 1910s, are there any parameters that you need that digital file to be, like a PDF, a 300 DPI, or is it all this information available on the website so people can reference back and actually see how that process works?
Well, if you donate the original, and I promise I could take care of it, but if you donate the original, I will actually take care of the scan. And like Elizabeth said, we don't hold on to the donation. We return it back to the user. So what I do is I will take the image and I will scan a high resolution image, and then we will well, first we will evaluate that image to make sure it's relevant to the website and its content. And then if it is, we will scan the image and then give it back to the person who donated it.
Sounds great. Catherine, welcome back. We were just kind of talking about how donating, and James submitted a question. No, that's no problem. I was about to start moving on to the next question. What can the photos and documents be used for? Would you like to take the question and kind of go from there?
Yeah, that'll be fine. And yeah, thank you for keeping the ball rolling. I've got two small
Sure.
children, and
I
so
get it. I
you
get it.
know,
Yeah, mine are 7 and 9. I understand.
yeah, sometimes mommy duties trump work duties.
Yeah.
But yeah, so thank you for that. Elizabeth, what are there any kind of particular images that the virtual museum is looking to add? Because we there's quite a wide variety that's already available. But is there anything or several, in things in particular that the museum would like to be able to include?
Well, personally, we are a bunch of volunteers. And so I can express something that I think would be good, but we're open to suggestions from anybody who would like to volunteer to assist us. Um, and I think that it would be nice if we had a little more information about the various mayors and of both Tuscaloosa and Northport, that would be an interesting resource. I also think we're a little bit short on information about local industries. So I think that would be something too. But we're very open to interests that other people may have. Um, so the other thing that I can think of is that many of the churches in the area were celebrating their 200th anniversary this year as well as the cities and the states. And so many of them may have some documentation now that they have put together that we could add to about the various churches that are in our community. So that's just some idea. When you had mentioned something about who or what you can use them for, basically our focus is on educational and personal use. But in the entry for each of the items, we try to give the name of the source. And so if you wanted to use it in some way that you might need to have permission to do so, you can contact the library and they can give you information about contacting the source of the original.
This is there are several organizations that all band together and collaborate together in order to make this available. And
Mhm.
the entire list is available on the website in the introduction. But it's the Tuscaloosa News, it's the Tuscaloosa Public Library, it's the Bryant Museum, City of Tuscaloosa, the Tuscaloosa County Preservation Society. So many organizations have come together and collaborated to make this possible. Are there any organizations in town or in the surrounding area that you would like to be involved, that maybe haven't been involved as yet?
Well,
Well,
we're
sorry, sorry. You go ahead, Elizabeth.
yeah, I was just going to say we're open to suggestions, but go
Well,
ahead, Ron.
well, yes. As Elizabeth mentioned, I do think it would be, well, personally, this is a cool interest of mine. For my project, I wanted to start a collection called Tuscaloosa Time Capsule, and that's where we reach out to small business owners in Tuscaloosa and basically just uh, get their perspective on Tuscaloosa as it currently stands, and maybe like a forecast for like possible growth. Like, where do you see Tuscaloosa in 10 years? So therefore, years from now, when people want to get a true perspective as to how Tuscaloosa was, back then, they could listen to these oral interviews and kind of get an idea of how things used to be. So that's one area I'd like to pursue. And once again, I think once we start to do things like this, people will go back and reference the site like, hey, my interview, it's on TAVM, go check it out. So I think that's a great way to just interact with the community.
We have a question from Kayleen, and I hope I'm saying her first name correctly. Kayleen Peters. She's asking the most important question for a volunteer-based organization: how do we volunteer?
Well, if our doors were open right now, you would come up to the reference desk at Tuscaloosa Public Library, and we would get you set up with that. It's just a volunteer form, and yeah, that's all it takes. Just come get a volunteer form at TPL, and we'll get you started.
And is there a way for volunteers, like, do volunteers have to be at the Tuscaloosa Public Library um, in order to volunteer for TAVM? Like, do they have to be at a library computer in order to input information, or can they do it? Can they do it from their home if they so choose, or if that's easier for them?
Well, so far, TPL has just been the de facto physical space for TAVM, but there are tasks that can be done at home. Like Elizabeth said, there is research that can be done at home, but TPL just serves as our physical space. So yeah, there are tasks that can be done outside the walls.
Yes, one can actually enter the items in their own home computer, and one of the processes that the library has provided is a site for us to get together and to do some training, because it's a public space. It's easier to do, but that's the way. So if you want a volunteer form, I think if you contacted the library, you could get one. And if you use the email address, I'm quite sure that they would manage to be able to respond and send it back to you.
Is there a way, Ron, for volunteers to fill out the form electronically, since the doors of the library are currently closed? Is there a way to
Yes, it's
continue to build
actually
that?
Yeah, it's actually available online. Let me see if I could do this in my head. If you go to Tuscaloosa-library.org, there is an About Us tab. You could click on that, go to Employment, and then on the right sidebar, you will see a form that says Volunteer Form. It's a PDF. You could just fill that out on your computer, or just print it off, scan it, and email it to us, and we'll get that taken care of.
Great. It's good to know that volunteers can continue to be involved and start the process of being involved, even though the physical library is building is not available at this time. So Brandon, do you have any questions or anything you want to add at this time?
Yeah, absolutely. So, looking through the site, I was happy enough to see, the Gorgas is on there. We've got a couple of our photos on there that I'm really excited to see, might be using and giving you a call about in the future. So what other photographs are on the site? Is it limited to buildings and people? What other things, we all said, what other things can you tell us about that are actually on the site?
Well, we have a number of collections that are based on the topic of the item. So we have some that deal with all kinds of subjects, from art and music. So there would be ones that dealt with the old theaters in town. Sometimes we have events like parades or things that have happened. We also have ones on industry and businesses. We have houses. We have sports. We have education. We have things about people. And we have a way for people, if you have a particular interest, then you can actually go and search for a particular topic. And at the top, you see there's a search bar, and you can pull things up that way if you would like to. Yeah, so there's the Gorgas house.
I know that building. That was pretty familiar.
Good.
That's not bad. So when you're creating the site, what were some of the challenges that y'all faced when you actually created them? How did you overcome them? What did you do to overcome these challenges?
Well, I think that we were very fortunate in that we had a number of people, both in the community and as members of different historically interested societies, who volunteered with us and who were willing to do the work, so that we could do it. And also through, especially when Betty Slow was working at the Tuscaloosa News, they sometimes had interns that were assigned to her from the university, and they also worked adding information about the photos that we put into the museum. The other area in which I think we are striving and to a certain extent struggling, and for which this I hope will be useful, is we need people to know about it and to learn about it and then to make use of it. So we have spoken at schools and tried to contact teachers more about it.
And I'm sorry, Elizabeth, go ahead.
No, that's
Well, we do, kind of along those lines, we have a question from James Scott. He says, in what ways do you research the provenance of photographs being donated?
That's a yeah, that's a good question. I guess so far, with donations, we do ask for basically, we try to authenticate the item, and then we also ask, okay, how did you acquire this photo? Who's in the photo? What is the event? So we do try to do that to authenticate the photo, and then we use those steps to see if it's relevant to the website. So I guess you could say it's a bit of an honor system, but so far, well, as long as I've been, we haven't had any issues with anything that wouldn't be relevant, or anything that someone presented that wasn't what they said it was. So yeah, I guess you could say we use a bit of an honor system with that.
well, and sometimes you have to go back to sources, to the earlier issues of the Tuscaloosa News, to books that have been published about the history of Tuscaloosa, and try to verify things that way as well. Or, for instance, the Tuscaloosa County Historical Association has some resources and archives that we can rely on to try to provide information about the item.
And because there are so many organizations that are involved, there is a bit of cross-referencing that happens as well, amongst all the organizations. So that's also helpful. But especially if an individual brings brings a photo, an older photo, and it's a group of people, their great grandfather may be in the photo, and they know who he is, but they may not know who the other people are. And then that actually is fun. It's kind of fun for us, because then we get to almost kind of put out an APB, do you recognize anyone in this photograph? And then and that also helps with community engagement. And so there is information that on some of these photographs that is not um 100% complete, in the case of, we may not know who a handful of individuals are, but the benefit of it being an online resource is we can go in and make those edits fairly easily.
Mhm.
And but that does give us a chance, particularly through the Facebook page, if there's an image that's posted, and we're either looking for more information, or looking to fulfill basic information, we can put that out there. And we can ask, we know who the third person from the left is. Do you recognize anyone else in these photographs? And so that's another way that that information is checked as well. But yeah, so there are actually several ways that that we do our best to authenticate the information as to the best of our ability. But yeah, so that was a great question. That was a great question.
Mhm.
So TAVM really focuses on, kind of our immediate area. The focus is Tuscaloosa and Northport, but that extends into our neighboring counties, and therefore the name Tuscaloosa Area Virtual Museum really makes our borders, to a degree, a little bit fuzzy, which is great, because it allows us the freedom to include things from neighboring counties that we feel are relevant. There are several images I'm familiar with that are from Pickens County and Fayette and those areas, which is also very interesting. But Ron, Elizabeth, do either of you know of similar sites for other regions in Alabama that may exist? So, for example, if someone's looking for historic images in Mobile, For example, are either of you aware of any similar sites across the state that do what TAVM does?
Well, I know personally, one of my favorites in Alabama is the Birmingham Public Library Digital Archives. Same thing, just different name. They do the same thing, and because Birmingham is such a rich cultural city, their collection is pretty robust. So, to my knowledge, they have a similar donation process. They'll evaluate the item and see if it's relevant. So each city's public library typically has some type of digital archive where you could go in and donate items or identify a relative if they need assistance with that. So yeah, it usually starts with the public library.
Yes, and also historical associations in different communities have um, archival collections that they put online as well, so that there is some some coverage of other areas as well. We're certainly not the only one that does this sort of thing. And then there's I mean, even the Library of Congress has a certain amount of stuff that covers the world, shall we say, that you can find things from.
Well, it's I think it's fantastic that the Tuscaloosa has this kind of resource that is doesn't really belong to any one organization. It is a true collaborative project, and I think that's one of the things that makes TAVM so special is that yes, it's kind of based and housed at the Tuscaloosa Public Library, but there are so many groups and organizations that and individuals that come together on a regular basis to contribute and work on it and promote it. So kind of along those lines, why do each of you feel like this is that it's important to have a resource such as this, um, not only for our area but in terms of the history of the state? So why is this an important resource?
Um, oh, go ahead,
Ron,
Liz.
well, say Ron, why don't you go first? Why do you think this is such an important resource?
I guess I came into the library world when there was a trend from physical space to digital. So accessibility is my main thing. Not everyone may be able to come to a physical archive, but most people can access a digital archive, just by simply typing in that URL. So it expands the reach, and I think that's why a resource like this is so important because everyone can get to it. Well, mostly everyone can get to it. So it really helps taking this relevant content and just expanding its reach by having it online.
And Elizabeth, what
Well,
makes
I was just going to say we feel that it's an important educational resource for children as well. And I guess seeing how what we all do on this little group, the concept of being interested in one's history is not a foreign concept to us. That we can advance better in the future if we know more about what went on in the past. So I think that that's kind of one of the most important things about dealing with historical images and historical facts and interpretations, etc.
Brandon, do you have anything that you wanna add or ask at
Oh
this
yeah,
time?
yeah, sure. So yeah, you're getting to the idea of understanding the past and doing research to understand the past, and I think it really shows the strength of like a multidisciplinary approach. Maybe because Kath and I, we work with anthropologists and archaeologists and historians and archivists. It's all a part of this holistic approach to understanding who we are and where we came from and how the regions developed. So often we do work with students. So if a student was going to access this website and use some of the images from it, how would they cite the website? Do they say that they've gotten it from the Tuscaloosa TAVM? How would they actually talk about this in their report or their paper, whatever they might be writing?
Well, under each photo, it has the original source. that you can credit that photo as well. So you would just say you access TAVM, and then you would list the original source. So most items have that original source, and like Elizabeth said, if you have any questions about who to credit, or if you have permission to use that photo, then you can contact the public library and we can assist you with that.
Yeah, so along those lines, student projects and maybe people doing any individual research, is there a favorite project or development or research idea that has come out of the TAVM, or any specific thing that really stands out to you about people accessing this for a project or a research?
Let's see.
Or you can throw a bunch of them out there.
I guess this would be more of a question of things I come across as far as like donations. Like I said, my office is currently filled with donations, so it would just be the learning things about Tuscaloosa that I didn't know. So if I were in the shoes of a student doing research on Tuscaloosa, I've learned so much about this site by coming across different things. Like, for instance, we have on TAVM, there is a photo of the first house built in Tuscaloosa. Who would have known? So things like that, I think you can only find on TAVM, and it's pretty interesting.
Elizabeth, is there a project that that you've heard about that has utilized TAVM?
Well, we have we do receive some comments from people over the time, and one of the things that was done by a woman, Jenny Claybrook, who was at the library previously, was a list of obituaries for people from the area who died in the various wars we've had. And we had received a number of people of the family who would say, yeah, we're so pleased to look that up and find some information about someone that they didn't actually know in the past, which I thought was pretty neat. At the same time, we would love to encourage people who had a member of their family who died in one of the wars to contact us if they could provide more information, because sometimes we don't have very much, but just a very brief obituary. So that's one project which is a little different, perhaps, but which I think resonates with people for whom it has some value.
Yeah, that's a really powerful thing to take in. I can see just how impactful that kind of a project could be. So Elizabeth and okay, we'll go to a question then instead from James. Does TAVM work closely with museum research and collections and hold special collections from the University of Alabama to help with the honor system? Do either one of you know anything about that?
I'd say since we're all in Tuscaloosa, there's always going to be a bit of an overlap. So there are some items that can be verified by going to either source. Like, for instance, we do have a lot of photos that are from the Corolla, and so you could verify that this photo is authentic by checking the Corolla that exists in Houle. So a lot of things can be verified because they are housed in both places. So I guess that's one method that, like I said, since we're all in Tuscaloosa, there is some overlap with the collection.
Yes, but at the same time, we've always wanted our resource to be more focused on the community. So when we did work with the Bryant Museum to do the Corolla portion, it was the ads for the businesses that were in. We didn't do things about the students per se, but more about the businesses in the community, which was I thought, a very interesting kind of resource. We don't tend to think about how much information about a community you get from looking at the advertisements.
But to just continue those points, that yes, we absolutely will check with any and all resources that we possibly can to answer any questions that may come up about any of the yeah, any of the items. So we definitely, the committee definitely works to do that due diligence. And if we find that we need to contact Hool to double check some things, then yes, we absolutely do. Or research collections, whomever,
Mhm.
or the Preservation Society, whomever we think will have that information and be able to authenticate it a little bit, more precisely than we can. Then yes, we absolutely work with those organizations and those institutions to make that happen. Um, so I know with 2,500 items on the site and available, it may be difficult. It may be difficult to answer this question, but I'm going to ask anyway. Do either what is your favorite image on the site, and why? Ron, do you have a favorite image on the site um that you just
Um,
like to look at?
My favorite image on the site is the image of Coach Frank Thomas and the coaching staff of the 1934 Alabama football team, simply because I like looking at pictures of old leatherhead football teams. I just think it's cool. So I really enjoyed that photo. That team went on to, if I'm not mistaken, that team went on to beat Minnesota in the national championship. They say that's not a national championship to claim, but it is. But
It counts.
it counts, right? So I
It
really
counts.
just like looking at that photo.
That's fantastic. Elizabeth, do you have a favorite, or do you have a collection of favorites? I know it is kind of hard to narrow it down out of 2,500 items, but do you have a favorite or a few favorites?
Well, I was going to say, I, in addition to photographs, we also have some documents. And one of the series that we have, I thought was kind of interesting in that it's called I Remember Old Tuscaloosa. And it was a series of short articles that appeared in the graphic newspaper over, I guess it was from basically the year 1971. And they were sort of reminiscences of things that had happened during his Maxwell's childhood. And I thought I kind of enjoyed that because it was so informal, but it gives you information about all kinds of strange things. Like the one I was reading the last time was about a man who made cigars, and it's it's just sort of minor little things that are kind of give you a sense of what the community was like at that time.
Hmm. Yeah, and the Maxwell family is a family that's been in Tuscaloosa for a very, very,
Yes,
very long
that's
time.
right.
And a number of family members have written histories about Tuscaloosa, and they seem a bit. They seem very connected with the history of Tuscaloosa. So yes, the Maxwell reminiscences are incredibly interesting. And Marie Ball wrote a lot about historic Tuscaloosa
Right.
as well, at one point in the newspaper, and there are several of her articles that have been uploaded as well. So there's a lot of there's a lot of variety of information that's
Mhm.
available on this site. It's not just photographs, but there's so much information that is both just a photograph, or these these documents that are now available in a digital format. Um, so along those lines, are there any particular benefits that you both see that this resource provides not only the community, but also on a perhaps in a statewide capacity? What benefits do y'all see this providing? Ron, we'll start with you.
Well, well, yeah, it's like I said, I, as Elizabeth mentioned, history needs to be preserved, and I think it takes the TAVM assumes the responsibility of preserving the communal, history of Tuscaloosa. So therefore, if someone wants to know something about Tuscaloosa, they're likely to find it at TAVM. So it's just a method of collecting these materials where you don't have to have them stored physically. So I do see a benefit of just having a collection of things that are easily accessible. Like I said, outside of our walls, because there's one collection that I want to work on in particular that I'm working on it because I was ignorant to the fact that it ever happened, and that's the Bloody Tuesday collection. I had no clue there was a Bloody Tuesday until I moved to Tuscaloosa. So if someone is doing research on civil rights in Alabama, then they're likely to come across a collection on Bloody Tuesday, and that's why those things need to be collected so people can find out about them.
And Elizabeth, is there anything you'd like to add to that? And I realize I may have already asked this question, and if that happened, I sincerely apologize. But is there could what I guess what is what's your perception on how something like this can be impactful on a statewide in a statewide capacity?
Well, I think in one sense, Tuscaloosa, because it has the university, has students, and the students don't all stay in Tuscaloosa, as we well know at this particular point in time. And so one would hope that this would provide them with some continuing contact with the area, even after they have moved to other parts of Alabama or other parts of the world. And it, in order for you to understand your history, you also sort of have to understand the greater expanse of history. So it seems to me that even our little community, shall we say, has relevance for people wherever they are.
I certainly agree, and I think that with the recent bicentennial celebrations, that has probably become more in the forefront of people's thoughts. Not maybe thinking a little bit more about what is the overall history of their town, their community, their county, and overall the state. So this is absolutely I think a wonderful resource in that capacity, because Tuscaloosa is so interesting. And we were the state capital. We continue to have the University of Alabama. We had Civil War activities that occurred here, civil rights activities that occurred here. There's so many things that happened here, that I think I think we're all in the same mind frame that the more we can make that available, the accessibility issue that Ron mentioned earlier, the more we can make accessible and available, the better we're all going to be. So. We have a comment from John Earl. He says, "I once wrote a series in the Graphic on people who known by everyone but not celebrities. I looked for copies of the Graphic at a couple of the libraries after I thought I'd lost my copies of the paper. I eventually found my copies of the Graphic. I wish the Graphic had been digitized." Is Ron? Do you happen to know if the library has any
We do.
copies of the Graphic?
Yes, we do have a run of the Graphic backed up on microfiche. Off the top of my head, I can't tell you what years those contain, but we do have the Graphic on microfiche. I would have to contact. So who asked that question, Mr. John Earl? Yeah, if I could just give you out my email address, it's rharris@tuscaloosa-library.org. So if you want to make contact with me, I could check on that for you. Like I said, I do know we have a run on microfiche. I'm not certain what years there are, but I can check on that for you.
Fantastic. Brandon, do you have any questions or anything you want
Sure.
to?
Yeah, I think I think Mr. Earl's comments about the importance of digitization can't be overstated at this point. As physical media becomes harder and harder to come by, and accessibility is the issue. You want to make sure you have these things saved for posterity, so that future generations, or even yourself in 10, 20, 30 years, can come back and find these resources. So my kind of question now kind of to follow up and finish up: have either of you donated content or submitted content to the TAVM? And if you have, what did you submit?
I'm only a Tuscaloosa transplant, so I don't have anything
Okay.
relevant to the Tuscaloosa
Well, I
area.
am also a Tuscaloosa transplant. I will say that I grew up on Long Island in New York, and I acquired some things because um, my family has dwindled down narrower and narrower. And I gave them to the museum in the hometown that I grew up in.
Mhm.
I'm not, I haven't, I don't go back quite that far in Tuscaloosa. I may have been here for 25 years, but that hardly counts.
That makes sense. Yeah, I'm also a Tuscaloosa transfer, so I know just what you meant, and I've been here almost 20 years now. So no, I understand. I get that point.
I haven't personally uploaded anything to TAVM, but I do have family connections of images within TAVM because I am related to the Tierces on my father's side. So if you're familiar with the northern part of the county, Tierce Patton Road,
Yeah.
those are my relatives, and so there are a couple of images of my great grandfather on TAVM, which is really interesting because that's really kind of the only photographs that I've ever seen of him are on TAVM. Um, so I guess out of this group, I'm the only legitimate local, native and local.
Mhm.
Right.
But yes, so I again haven't personally contributed anything, but I do have personal connections to it. But I also was over at the Preservation Society when this project started, and so I've been involved in a variety of capacities. And anytime that I can let anyone know about this as a resource, I am always mindful to tell as many people as I can. Anybody that comes into the Transportation Museum or really in any capacity, if it's historic related, I go, "Are you familiar with the Tuscaloosa Area Virtual Museum?" And they go, "No," and I said, "Oh my gosh, you're gonna love this." And it is an incredible resource, and um, we're very fortunate to have it available in our area. I can see by our timer that we're probably getting close to time. So, Ron, do you have any final thoughts or anything that you'd like to mention in these last couple of minutes? Are you working on a project?
Yes, I was actually working on a project entitled "What's Your Story?" Unfortunately, it was set to launch right before we closed, so I'm a bit bummed about that. But once we know when we're going to reopen, we'll jumpstart that again. But yeah, "What's Your Story?" It's basically a digital preservation workshop. So basically, you can bring in old photos, old documents, and we can back them up for you. And what I mean by that is we can put them on the cloud for you. We can put them on a jump drive for you. We can put them on a disk for you. So therefore, you don't have to hold on to that original and worry about whether or not you can, maintain, whether or not you can preserve it. You have it backed up, and you can pass it along to whoever needs it. But also, if you have anything relevant to the Tuscaloosa area, then we can review it and possibly put it on TAVM. Also, along with that, we were doing an oral history project. So if you have a story or anecdote relevant to the Tuscaloosa area, you could set up an appointment with us, and then we could record an oral history.
Brandon, remind me to put Ron in touch with all of the fabulous historians that we know at the University of Alabama who are also working on
Yeah,
oral history projects because
yep.
I think
I got a
there's
note. Yeah,
potential for crossover here.
yeah. I've got a couple of notes for different people that I'm going to be getting y'all in touch with. So yeah. So
Sounds great.
be on the lookout.
Oh,
Yeah.
very good. We appreciate you having us on because we are always looking for additional ways to provide people with publicity about us so that they know that we exist. And we're very pleased.
Well, it's been absolutely great having you both on and having the opportunity to talk about this resource that is available and has always been relevant, but especially in this time where so many people are still at home, has become even more relevant. And again, I think we're always trying to find ways to make to be as accessible as possible. But Elizabeth, do you have any final thoughts or anything that you'd like to share?
No, I would just like to encourage everybody. History doesn't have to be educational. Sometimes it can just be enjoyable. And it's kind of fun to sometimes look at things and say, oh, is that right? Did it look like that then? It doesn't have to be, arduous. It can be just enjoyable and fun.
Yes, edutainment, I think, is the new
Yes.
word. I think the new word is edutainment. But yes, absolutely. The TAVM is a fantastic resource if you're interested in doing, serious research. It's a wonderful resource, and potentially a jumping off point for a variety of topics. But it is just fun to look through old images and go, oh, is that what Greensboro Avenue used to look like? And then you try to, yes, it is. It's a wonderful resource for serious research and also for edutainment. But thank you both so much for being here. It's been so great to not only see you both again, but have the chance to talk about this resource. Just thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, that was awesome. Just as a personal note, when I was pulling things up on the site, I noticed that I guess my search history was putting things in there, and I was laughing at myself because, I'm a DC Comics fan, so things that came up said Crisis on Infinite Earths and Lena Luthor, and I was like, I'm not going to find that on this site because they're not real people and they're not part of Tuscaloosa history. So I was just personally laughing at myself that was what was showing up when I was trying to search for things. So that just kind of cracked me up. All right. Well, that was a lot of fun, and I'm definitely going to be looking at some of that history to learn more about Tuscaloosa, because I was a student at the University of Alabama, so I lived there for 4 years, and now I'm working there, so I could use to learn a little bit myself. All right. Well, I think that's going to do it for this Museums from Your Home live stream. We'll be doing this every weekday, Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. And each day will feature a different aspect of UA Museums. Tomorrow, we're going to be hanging out over at the Office of Archaeological Research, as well as the Moundville Archaeological Park's Facebook pages and the UA Museums YouTube channel. So if you want to make sure that you're always keeping up with everything we do, you can just subscribe to youtube.com/UA-museums, and all of our live streams will be there. All of our video content is there. But you can also go to museums.ua.edu/museums from your home, and that will have our live stream schedule, our educational resources, and all the information that you would ever want as a one-stop shop on that website. If you're interested in supporting anything we're doing here with the museums and Museums from Your Home, you can go to give.ua.edu/museums, and that will give you a link to become a supporting member if you are enjoying what we're doing here. All right. Well, thank you to Brandon and Catherine and Ron and Elizabeth for joining us today. And thank you to everyone who is watching and visiting UA Museums from your home. All right. Well, have a great day, everybody.
You too. Stay safe.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.